Okay, we are now recording our session. And then the last thing, or the next thing I want to do, let me mention a couple of things. First, you should be on mute. If you're not, please mute your audio. That way we don't have a lot of feedback. There'll be an opportunity for questions at the end of the session, so hold your questions. Excuse me. But it's a lot better if you keep the video and the audio off for now. Bandwidth-wise, I've had a little trouble with my internet over the last couple of days, but if we lose internet, don't panic. I'll log out, back in, and fix it, or adjust accordingly. So let me do the next thing I want to do, which is to share my PowerPoint for today. There we are. Okay. So this is Data 640. Some of you have had Data 610 with me before. So some of you are familiar with a little bit of my style, but of course the content of the course is entirely different from 610. We are now at the point where you've had your acquaintance with data visualization. You've also had Data 610. You've even gotten into data mining, so you've done a few things with decision trees, maybe a little bit of neural networks, etc. And in Data 640, we move into what we call sort of the advanced predictive modeling tools. So we'll get into a little bit more detail on that now. But what's really important here in the short term is to make sure that everyone understands the ground rules. So I'm going to go through this little presentation here, and I think you'll be aware of what the ground rules are. Introductions, outline, grading, miscellaneous, and we'll talk a little bit about what you're going to do in the next week or two, and finally an opportunity for you to ask questions if there are any. Okay, so let's move on. Introductions. Now, again, there's a little area there where you can put in what you do for a living if you choose. It helps me to see what people are now interested in. Some of you are out there actually doing analytics for a living. Some of you may have a lot of experience with SAS. Some of you may not. That's fine. We don't presume any experience with the software that we're going to use in the course. Presume your analytics background is what you've had thus far in the program, in the MSDA program. So that's kind of where we start. So if you want to put a little bio that says, oh, I'm doing this and that, it sort of helps me get a feel for what we may want to emphasize in the course, may want to do more of, do less of, etc. You want to make certain that you do have an email address that is appropriate. In other words, the one that's in Leo is the one that we're going to use. So if you change your email address, you need to fix that. And then if you have other interests you'd like to sort of hear more about in the course, certainly you can stick that in there too, and we'll try to address some of that. Okay. Now, where are we? Well, you may recall that we started in 610 by saying there are three things the data scientists of today really needs to be good at: framing the problem, solving the problem, telling a story, which includes selling the answer, explaining the answer, and making some recommendations as to what to implement for the organization to do something better. Otherwise, why are you doing analytics? And it's become more and more important from the analytics side that the data scientists both are able to not only do the modeling, but are able to understand and present and explain the modeling. Because you're not going to sell anything if you wave your arms and say, well, it's a black box, it's a neural network, I can't really tell you what goes on, or a support vector machine or an ensemble model. And you'll see how difficult that can be sometimes as we go through some of these models in this course. So I like this research report. It's only a couple of years old. And I think it still holds true. In fact, I'm going to post a link to a newer research report that came out less than a month ago, well, just about a month ago, and has some great information which says more of the same. It says that we're still moving towards using analytics in organizations, but we're not there yet. We're not exactly seeing an overwhelming number of people taking full advantage of what they could do with analytics. And it's becoming more important to do so. So in this research report, of course, they said, well, the key thing is you need to have skills. You need to be able to build models, present models, explain models. And you also need to understand what you've done so that you can explain and help implement that. So it's going to become more important for the data scientists to work with the functional people hand in hand so that it becomes more of a business endeavor, not just a quantitative modeling endeavor. And we'll say a lot more about that as the course rolls on. Okay, so this course focuses on what we call advanced predictive models. And of course, we're going to look at classification models. We're going to look at numerical models for predicting continuous targets, and we're going to look at ensemble models. Now, the ensemble models are especially interesting because they're probably the hottest thing going. We are going to use one software package, SAS Enterprise Minor Software. I'll say more next week about why SAS, but it is certainly by far the best-selling predictive modeling software out there. It's not free. It is free for use in this course and free for your use throughout the MSDA program. In fact, when I taught a section of 670 last semester, which is the practicum, the capstone course, I would say about 80% of my students use SAS Enterprise Minor for their analysis, for their major project. That doesn't mean you have to. You can use Python, you can use R, you can use anything else that's appropriate. But it is a very powerful package. Now, with power comes complexity sometimes. I want to emphasize that this is not a course designed to teach you all about the SAS Enterprise Minor software. Yes, we use it. We use it very thoroughly. We go into some depth. But you're not taking a course just to learn how to use SAS Enterprise Minor software. You're taking a course to learn about advanced predictive models. This happens to be the tool that we want to acquaint you with so that you've seen all of the powerful tools that are out there, because when you get in the real world, you're going to run into tools from SAS. You're going to run into R. You're going to run into Python. You may run into Watson Analytics. So we want to make sure you've seen all these tools, and this one is really, really neat once you get the hang of it. Once you get the hang of it. So we'll certainly coach you along the way and give you plenty of help. It won't be a problem. But by the end of the semester, I think you'll like the software a lot. Okay, now, what models do we actually cover? Well, as you can see, our focus is on the ones listed on the chart. Regression models, both linear and logistic, one for continuous targets, one for discrete or categorical targets. We also cover support vector machines, probably a technique you haven't heard much about. It's been around for about maybe 15, 20 years. So it's considered one of the newer techniques, but it's had a renaissance recently because it's shown to be extremely effective. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's really risen quickly in terms of popularity are the ensemble models, and there's several of those. There's bagging, boosting, random forest, strange sounding terms. There's also heterogeneous models that SAS Enterprise Minor is especially good at building. Now, for each of these, we'll go into some depth. How do you develop them? When should you use them? What are the advantages and limitations? As you know by now, we don't just have one technique that works for everything. Decision trees are nice. They're easy to build. They don't require much data manipulation. They don't require any transformations. They're simple. You can even explain them. They have one big drawback. They're not usually as accurate as the other models. So if you're looking for accuracy and precision and robustness, and you have a certain data sets, then other techniques come into play. So each of these techniques, as you know, has strengths and weaknesses, and we'll talk about those. And so we want to develop a complete analysis every time we use one of these techniques, and I'll talk about what I mean by a complete analysis in just a minute. Now, this doesn't mean we're not going to harken back and refer back to decision trees, neural networks, things that you've had in perhaps 630, because those come into play, especially when we get to ensembles, because those are other techniques that can be used. And so, of course, SAS Enterprise Minor does all of those techniques as well. These are the ones, however, we'll focus on. We can revisit those others. I've got videos explaining some of those others. I do a lot of videos. I've got probably 60 or 70 videos now out on Vimeo, and you'll see some of those in the classroom as we go through the lessons. Others are support videos and other things. So anytime you need some help, I certainly like creating videos and making them available. In addition to covering those techniques, and those techniques are tied to specific assignments, we will cover a couple of other techniques that we won't really do much with in terms of developing models, but are becoming more interesting, more important, more relevant and certainly you'll do a little bit with deep learning in Data 650. So I want to start you on that path. So I'm going to cover an introduction and overview. Downstream, you won't have to worry about this for several lessons. It'll just be informational. Evolutionary models, genetic algorithms. You know, they are suited for a certain kind of problem where we don't have past data. Well, if you don't have past data, you can't build any of the predictive models I showed on the previous charts. You can't build decision trees, can't build neural networks, regression, support vector, any of those. So what do you do? Well, you'll see with genetic algorithms, it's more of a prescriptive tool, but it can also help build some very good analytical models. And then we'll spend a little bit of time near the end of the course talking about deep learning. I'm sure most of you have something like Google Photos on your phone, and you should be amazed at how you can say, show me photos of my cat, and up comes your cat, or show me photos of my kids, and up come your kids, or show me photos from January 2012, and up come the photos. Well, all of that's made possible, but deep learning, which is really, really hot. And it's great for text mining and other things. And again, you do more of that in Data 650. So for each of these techniques, we do cover an overview, some advantages, limitations, and give you some good examples. But you won't do near as much with these techniques as you will with the model ones I had on the previous slide. Now, let me remind you that when we built the MSDA program, and I was one of the gang of 6 that put it together 3 years ago. We're now in our 3rd year. We started in the spring of 2014. We wanted it to be a competency-based course. In fact, it was the first competency-based course at UMUC. So what do we mean by that? Well, that means all of your assignments are based on what you can do, not what you know. Now, of course, you have to know stuff to do stuff, but we're not going to ask you to critique an article. We're not going to ask you to give a historical recapitulation of how neural networks were developed or anything like that. We're going to ask you to apply the techniques to real-world data sets or data sets that are similar to real world. And we're going to ask you to be able to explain and talk about what you've done. It looks like somebody's camera is coming up, so let me... I hope it's not my camera. I didn't intend for my camera to be there. Move that out of the way. Okay, so that means graded assignments, again, are based on what you can do, not what you know. And that's to your benefit, by the way, because when you complete the MSDA program, you should have a fairly expansive portfolio of things you've done, which should serve you well in job interviews. Somebody says, oh, you got a master's in data analytics. I guess you know a lot. You say, well, not only do I know a lot, but I've done some things. I've built some models. I've explained some models. I've done a practicum, et cetera, et cetera. It also means that because the assignments are competency-based, they probably take a little more time to do. And so there are fewer assignments in most of our courses, not one a week like, you know, a 12-week course. We don't have 12 assignments. In fact, in this course, we have 5. 5 written assignments and one small piece of the course assigned for discussion items. So that means there can be weeks between assignments. Now, those weeks I try to make sure there's some activities for you to do because you don't want to let those weeks just go by and say, well, I had a busy week, I'll double up next week. That is not going to work. Remember, the expectation is that you will put in between 15 and 20 hours per week to succeed in any of our courses. Now, that 15 to 20 hours includes doing the readings, contributing to the discussions, doing the activities and or assignments, maybe practicing the software, et cetera, et cetera. So if you start saying, wow, I guess I can just slack off on the weeks where there's no assignment due, you're going to end up in trouble. And that's really where the students who have trouble end up getting in trouble. And then they'll be wanting, I need extra time, I need extra time. So, well, what did you do last week? So you need to really make sure that you're finding that time. And it'll become especially important because this course, the assignments are sort of backloaded. In other words, we spend the first 3 or 4 weeks learning enough about the software and enough about the techniques so we can actually start doing some of the written assignments. So the weeks in between assignments are your opportunity to make sure you're keeping up, catching up, and doing the work that needs to be done. So there'll be plenty for you to do. Now, speaking of the assignments, everybody wants to know what I have to do and when does it due? Well, here they are. And you can see we do not have a graded assignment to turn in until week 5. boy, is that dangerous. And I wish I could do it differently, but I've found now, having taught this course for about 5 semesters, that it really takes 3 to 4 weeks before you're fully conversant. You've got the software up and loaded. You've done the practice problems. You're feeling comfortable with it. You understand the techniques that we've covered in the first few weeks, and you're ready to go. So I don't think I can speed that up much, so I'm not going to try. So the first assignment isn't due until week 5, but then the pace picks up. As you can see, your first regression model, the linear regression model for a continuous target, is due in week 5. Then your next assignment is due the next week, or a logistic regression model for a classification problem, week 6. 2 weeks later, support vector machine models, due in week 8. 2 weeks later, your first ensemble model, bagging, boosting, random forest models, week 10. And you'll notice I'm saying models, not model, so I'm using plural, because here's a piece of background that I think is absolutely critical. I'm old enough to know and to have done a lot of these techniques, I won't say by hand, in other words, not with a piece of chalk and a chalkboard maybe, but certainly using TI 58, 59, small calculators, nascent computers which didn't have much power. The first time I built a neural network, I was at the National Defense University. We paid $20,000 to have a special board put in a computer so it could do a neural network. Today, you certainly can do any of the neural networks we're talking about with your desktop PC or your portable PC, maybe even on your phone soon. Anyway, the point is this. We have quickly come to a point where the software is powerful enough to do the heavy lifting of the calculations. The tediousness of trying to calculate a regression model, and I've done those by hand, is gone. The tediousness of figuring out the weights on the connections in a neural network is gone. The software does that for you. What you need to do is build multiple models. In the old days, meaning 20, 25 years ago when I was doing this, we built one model and we were exhausted. You built one model and said, gee, I hope that's right. And we spent a lot of time trying to determine whether we had the right variables and had we done it right, but you were too far down the road in terms of time to go back and build multiple models. Now, you can change a parameter, hit the enter key, and you've got another model. So it now becomes the thing to do is to build multiple models and then sort them out on the proper accuracy and relevant measures of complexity, etc. We'll say a lot more about that in week 3. So anyway, the last assignment is your second ensemble model, a heterogeneous model. A lot different than the first kind of ensemble model, in case you're wondering why we have 2 assignments on ensemble models. You also see the weights on each of the assignments, roughly equivalent, with the exception of a little bit less weight on support vector machines. We only had access to support vector machines in SAS Enterprise Minor starting last semester. So I put a little bit less weight on that because it's a newer technique and the software added that module. And so things like that and some of the ensemble models were added recently and allowed for us to use, so they had a little bit less weight. Now, we have a small percentage of the course grade based on your contributions to the discussion items. There'll be discussion items every week. I find the discussion items to be extremely relevant from my perspective because it's an opportunity for you to say what you've seen going on in the world of analytics. Again, some of you may have jobs already in the world of analytics, and so maybe you're using some of these techniques in your organization. Well, great. You can share and expand and compare and help us all understand how those are being used in your organization, the pros, the cons, maybe even little miniature case studies. You may also talk about the culture of your organization. Is it going to understand some of these techniques? What's going to be the problems? So the discussions are a great opportunity to share. And so your grading on that 5% of the course is based basically on sort of an overall estimate of how valuable your contributions were. That means you should contribute something each week, but it needs to be something insightful or significant, not just a good job, Mary, or that's a nice post, Tom. We've all done that to fill a square, but I'm looking for something a lot meatier in order to get you a grade higher than the minimum on the discussions item. I'll talk about how the other models are graded, the written models, 1 through 5 in just a minute. Okay, for each of these written assignments, each of the models, you're going to do several things. And I've tried to outline the tasks, and once we have the rubric finalized and up, the grading rubric and the final detailed tasking, which will be there within a week, certainly it will contain these same items. These are the things you need to do. These are the things a data scientist has to do. This is a soup to nuts approach. The first thing you have to do, of course, is fully describe the problem. What is it you're trying to do? You can't just say, oh, I found this data set, I'm going to look at it and see what happens. No, you need to say, I have a data set, I'm trying to predict the number of customers who will churn. You need to pick and choose your data sets. Now, if you've looked at the website for the course, you see there are lots of data sets I've already loaded there that may be useful. I don't say all of them are great for predictive analytics, but many of them are. I put a lot of them out there that I got from SAS and other places. You need to examine those data sets if you're going to choose one of those. I also encourage you, if you're comfortable, and I emphasize that, to take on some of the real-world data sets. They can be from Kaggle, which has competitions. They can be from UCI. They can be from other places. Any data set that you find that's appropriate is great. But sometimes students say, well, I'll show him, I'll take on this data set with 10 million cases and 50,000 variables, and and all of a sudden your whole time is spent trying to manage the data set. And that's not what this course is about. This course is about building the predictive models. So don't get yourself in over your head. If you're not comfortable with any of the techniques and models, take a look at the data sets I have in the classroom and find one that's reasonable. Now, reasonable doesn't mean 300 cases. Reasonable means at least usually a few thousand cases as a minimum and a few tens of variables or 15 or more variables that you can choose from, because otherwise it's almost a toy problem. So be careful with your data sets. Robustness is a consideration. Task 2, once you've got your data set and fully explained what you're going to do with it, then you go and pull a sample of that data into SAS Enterprise Minor. Now, if the data set is small, yes, SAS can handle the entire data set. The reason I have you do a sample, which could be a 90% sample, is because you need to learn that sampling is important. And one of the things you can do with a sample is it's one way of building multiple models. You sample the data, build a model. You say, well, that came out interesting, but maybe it's just because of the way that sample came in. So build another sample with a different random number, build another model, and see if it holds up, because that's one way of seeing if there's consistency and rigor to the models. So you have to explain what you did with your samplings. Task 3, explore the data. Having the data set and pulling it in is one thing, but you got to go look at it. You got to look for what? Missing cases, anomalies. Hey, this is a data set, and one of the variables is age, and I see the lowest age is 0. Well, that's really hard to do. And I see the highest age is 140. That's really hard to do also. So, we're going to talk about this thing called the SEMA approach, which is the way SAS, it's an acronym that SAS Enterprise Minor uses. I'll go through it in detail next week. But this is important, that you look for anomalies. Most of the data sets that are in the classroom are fairly well structured, but they all have a few quirks in them for the most part. And you got to find those quirks, and you got to be able to make sure you adjust for those, whether it's missing data, whether it's outliers, etc. Now, cleansing the data. After you've found those outliers, what do you do about them? Well, you got to cleanse them, right? You either got to adjust for them, you got to eliminate cases, which is dangerous because sometimes that reduces your data set down too small. You got to transform some of the variables sometimes. You got to normalize some of them, standardize some of them, depending on the technique. Some techniques can only handle numerical variables, and so they have to be done, and so forth. You may have to add dummy variables. We'll talk about all that. That's why we spend the first 3-4 weeks making sure everybody's comfortable with terms and all. So if this stuff sounds mysterious to you, don't worry. We'll have complete lessons coming up. And then finally we get to task 5. That's where you get to have fun and build the models. Yay, we can build the models. And it says develop several models. Again, with the ease to which models can be developed, there is no reason not to develop several models. There's no reason why the calculation should be a hindrance. You simply can tweak a few parameters, maybe you change a few variables, you combine some variables, you try things. And that's where you need to be somewhat creative. Okay? Now, once we've built all these models, we have to sort them out, don't we? We have to say which ones are the best ones, which one's the champion. And the champion model isn't always the most accurate one. There's a trade-off there. We have to come up with the best model, and best is a combination of accuracy, complexity, ease of implementation, etc. If you have a decision tree model that is just a little bit less accurate than a neural network model, guess what? You go with the decision tree model every time because you can explain that far easier than trying to explain neural networks. Trust me. And I'm sure you know that now. So we use the appropriate accuracy measures, and we have multiple accuracy measures. You don't just have one. If you look at that overview lesson that's encapsulated in your lesson guidance for the week, you'll see that a brief overview of those accuracy measures is mentioned, and we'll go in great detail in week 3. And then, of course, we have to pull up some conclusions and takeaways, don't we? Doesn't do any good to say, look at all these neat models, and this one's the most accurate, I'm done. No, we have to say, okay, what would you do with this? What would be some takeaways? What are 3 or 4 things I can take away from this study? Maybe you didn't find anything. Maybe your predictive model, you had a great data set and all, but the variables did not predict the target well. Well, that happens. It doesn't mean you failed. It means that, okay, that didn't work out because those variables are clearly not predictive of the target I'm trying to predict. So I got to find different variables or not try to predict that target, one of the two. So these are all the things that I think need to be done to have a complete model. Now, this chart, which I'm sure you can't read, but you can download these slides and blow this up. And I'm going to take you to the website for this. If I can find it. Here it is. No, that's not it. Where is it? No, that's not it. Well, maybe I won't take you to the website for this. I know it's here somewhere. Here it is. I hope you can see this. This is just a slide blown up. SAS has a conference every year in which they allow anyone who puts in a paper to, oh, we can't see it. Okay. All right. Well, let me just stick with this one that you can see. Let me go back to, you should be able to see this one, I guess. Slideshow from current slide. Okay, let's stay with this. That's the same slide, by the way. All I had was a bigger version of it, but you can download it and blow it up, or you can go to the link at the bottom of the slide and get it yourself. Let me just explain what's in it because I wasn't going to spend any time on it anyway. This is a presentation done at a SAS conference in 2015. I got it right out of the proceedings, which are online, and it was done by a student and a professor at Oklahoma State University. And what's interesting about it is the study is interesting, but what's interesting about it is all of those steps that I just talked about, all of those 7 steps are contained on this one page. Now, don't take that as a challenge. I'm not saying I want you to do it in one page. I don't. But I found it interesting. You know, there's an abstract over here about what the problem was about. There's a data set description. There's a data preparation. There's exploratory analysis looking for anomalies. There are the models, and they built several. There's the model comparison, that's the results. There's an explanation of the results and the takeaways, and some references and acknowledgments. Wow, on one page. And it is readable if you blow it up a little bit. It is readable, trust me. Now, I'm not saying I want you to do that because I don't. I want you to take, 6, 7, 8 pages, whatever it takes. But I am saying, isn't it neat that they were able to do this entire 7-step process that I think is appropriate in one page? And it is readable if you blow it up a little bit. It's very clear, especially if you understand a little bit about what they did. So that's just an example. Okay, now the discussion items. I already said a lot about the discussion items, so I don't have to dwell on this. But basically, again, they will unfold. They will become available to you each week. Some people say, well, why don't you show all of them the first week? No, I want you to focus on that week's sort of topic, if you will, and contribute to those discussion items. It's important to keep everyone sort of on track. I know some of you will want to go faster. Some of you will want to go a little bit slower. Some of you will want to go much greater in depth with SAS Enterprise Minor. You'll say, I know we use the software to do the models, but what was that little button on the left about the 5th row down where we didn't click on that? Well, I don't know. I know a lot about SAS Enterprise Minor. I don't know everything, and I'm not a SAS Enterprise Minor instructor. However, the software is fairly intuitive once we get into it, once you get comfortable with it, and you will certainly be led through all of the pieces you need to know. But it does have an awful lot of other options, kind of like saying Microsoft Word has other options that we don't know about. It does, right? But you don't need them very often. So this is what the discussions were all about, and I've already talked about that. Again, our software package is SAS Enterprise Minor. You can go visit the fact sheet and see about it. You can also look at this chart down here, and you'll notice, again, if you blow this up to where you can see it, that SAS Enterprise Minor has about a third, of the entire market. Now that says 2013. I can assure you, because we're going to talk more about current stuff next week with SAS, they have maintained that leadership. I've been to their SAS Academy a couple of times in Cary, North Carolina. It's fantastic. And they've been voted one of the top organizations to work for many years. They have a great piece of software, and they have twice the market share of anyone else. Next competitor would be IBM with SPSS. So they are the leader, and that's one reason. The second reason is, of course, they let us have the software for free, and it's a software package you should be familiar with when you go out in the real world. So we have lots of reasons, and we'll go through that a little bit more detail next week. Some tips for success. The biggest tip, as I've already given you, is don't fail to put in the requisite hours per week. The second biggest tip would be practice, 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 just like learning to do anything. The more opportunities you have to use the software, the more facile you will become, the more in depth you'll be able to go, because you'll begin to understand, oh, I see why that option is there. So I encourage you to explore the options. As I said, I may or may not be able to answer your questions on every option. I doubt if I will, but already people in the classroom are sharing their ideas and expertise. It was interesting in the summer session we actually had an employee of SAS in the course. Works for SAS and has for 20 years, and he didn't know more about SAS Enterprise Minor than we did, because he wasn't in that department, but he'd used it, but he learned quite a bit. There are a lot of how-to videos out there. If you put SAS Enterprise Minor videos into your search engine, you will be besieged with tons of them. I don't think you're going to have time, nor will you want to look at all of them, but there are some great walkthroughs. There's a 6-part Getting Started with SAS Enterprise Minor, and there are some great walkthrough documents. We will be using these documents for our practice problems, because what's nice about them is they're step by step, and if you follow those steps, you should get the same answers they got. And that way you can see, did I do it right or not? I've mentioned the bottom item, data sets, choose them wisely. Larger data sets give you better models. You want lots of rows. You want a significant number of columns, the variables, to pick from. You want to have a lot of choices for picking your variables. You want to have a lot of rows to cover the waterfront of all of the kinds of combinations. If you don't, you really won't get a very good predictive model. But when you start getting into extremely large numbers of rows and columns, and trying to learn software at the same time, and trying to learn perhaps these techniques for the first time, it becomes overwhelming. So you have to sort of do a trade-off. I need a reasonable sized data set. Okay? So appropriate sized data set. That's not much help, probably. We do have 3 sections of Data640 running this semester. I have, of course, this one, or one of them. I think people are here from all 3 sections, perhaps, because we invited all 3. Dr. Chakraborty has section 9041, and Dr. Oskan has section 9042. We all use the same materials. We all use the same readings. We all use the same assignments. We all use the same grading rubrics, so don't be concerned. you will see that the lessons, by and large, have videos in them developed by me. Not that your other faculty couldn't do the same and may want to add something to those, but we start with that premise. So that's kind of where we're at. Required readings and videos each week. Now I'm going to try to, let's see here. I still want to share my screen. Let me hit stop sharing. I'm going to go share my screen differently here because I wanted to show you, and I'm sure you've been there, and I should still be able to see this, classroom. Okay, this is our classroom. I hope you can see that. Well, I'm sure all of you have at least gone in there once and taken a look. There's a couple of things you want to do right away. Now, my view is different than yours. Thank you, Danny. That's good to have verification that I'm not talking to something that we can see. This is my view, so I'm the instructor. I have a little different view than you do, but basically each week you will have a lesson, okay, Introduction to Predictive Analytics, and in that lesson will be something called a weekly lesson guidance. Remember, starting last fall, we eliminated the requirement to purchase any textbooks for any of our courses. That's saving you lots of money, probably saving you several $100s per semester. And so we found resources, what we call open educational resources to use. But each week you will have a lesson guidance document that contains a short overview of what the lesson is about. And if you scroll down, you know, again, there are the weekly required readings, so there are links to those. Again, they're open source. And then there's a video by this character each week for the most part. This one is a 25-minute long predictive analytics overview that I created, and I have lessons, videos for each week. And, of course, you can do full screen and so forth. And then there's the activity for the session, and finally the references if you want to go look up the references for the readings. So that will be there for each week. I would also encourage you to check the announcements section frequently. If I find an interesting article come out in the middle of the week, I'm going to put something in the announcements section and say, you might want to look at this. I won't change the required readings, but of course I would think you'd want to look at those. They add depth, I would think you'd want to look at those. Okay? So let me go, this was that PowerPoint presentation. Let me go back to my slides. Okay, so you want to be sure and look at that lesson. It should come up Saturday night or Sunday morning each week is when I try to have them scheduled to appear, because I don't want you to get too far ahead. I know, again, some of you say, well, I've got a lot of experience, I want to roar through this. No, it works better if I try to keep the herd together, because our expectations are that all you know about analytics, you know, our starting point is all you know about analytics is what you've had thus far in the MSDA program. Again, some of you, real-world experience, been doing this for a longer period of time, maybe ready to move a little quicker. Others, not so much. So we try to keep everybody together. So there are required readings each week. Make sure you read all of them. They are extremely important, and we don't go back and say, let's regurgitate what's in them. We say we're going to start, those videos start from a point that says you've read those. Most weeks there are required videos to view. Sometimes there are additional web-based articles and links included. And again, updated will occur as I find them in the announcements section. You should check that daily. That would be great. Let's see. Jason says, well, we'll get to your questions in a minute, Jason. Hold on to that. Let me finish here, and I'm just about done, and then we'll get to the questions. Okay, let me say a little bit about grading. You know, people say, well, I turned the assignment in on time. I covered all of the tasks. I did those 7 things he said to do. I guess I get an A. No, not necessarily. If you do everything that we say you need to do to cover the task adequately, if you turn that in on time, you don't have typos, misspelled words, your references are proper, you still might get a good solid B, because that is the gold standard. That is the norm. Okay? You've done what you were assigned to do. If you want to have a chance of getting a higher grade, you have to do more than what was assigned. That may be a variety of things. It may be more models, it may be more analysis, it may be more insights, it may be more depth, it may be more data manipulation, it may be a larger data set, it may be lots of things. But don't take that as a challenge. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with a good solid B. You get Bs in the courses, you will graduate. So the B is the normal grade. So on time, on task work, get somewhere between 80 and 85. If it's a little bit better, it'll be a little bit higher grade. If it's excellent, showing clear evidence of critical thinking above and beyond what was required, your chances of getting an A are enhanced. Okay? We always strive, of course, been doing this a long time, and the other professors as well, we always strive to be as fair and objective as possible. You know, again, a B is good work. I personally like to give audio feedback, so I use a program called Pure Voice, which lets me create audio feedback in addition to the rubric. And so I will likely do that for most of, if not all of the assignments. And of course, if you have something you want to push back about, that's certainly welcome and allowed. Sometimes we do miss things. Miscellaneous. Again, the lesson guidance will show up every week. I would advise you to look at it as soon as you can. You say, well, he's going to be posting it on Sunday, and maybe I'll look at it Friday. Well, that's not leaving you much time to do whatever the activities are. So, again, make sure you look at it as early as you can and say, oh, that's what I've got to do this week. I need to prepare and plan accordingly. And remember, there's a recorded video demo. Sometimes it's demos of the software. Sometimes it's lecture material talking about regression or support vector machines and explaining that. And I try to explain it in clear and concise English without using a lot of mathematical jargon. I think that's important. You can read the math in the articles. You can absorb it if you'd like. What you're going to have to do in the real world is explain it in fairly plain English. This is why we did this. Okay? If we need more online office hours to discuss things, we can certainly arrange that. Software walkthroughs, there's a lot of those. I've recorded those. And, of course, anytime you want, post questions in the discussions area. There is one special discussion area that says, let me have any questions, and that's great for questions where the answer would be beneficial for all to see. So anytime you see something posted in that, you should definitely look at that and see if that answer is relevant to something you're questioning too. And of course, if it's a personal thing or something just related to you and you'd rather ask it via email, we're always available for that. We try to answer any questions posed within 24 hours. That's our goal. We don't always meet that goal, but usually we do. And of course, if it's an emergency, you can feel free to call your professor. So read the announcement section often, every day. Let me have any questions area, and that's it. Okay, so let me finish up by just saying a little bit about week one. Week one is your chance to get your feet on the ground, get comfortable, certainly do the required readings, look at the video that's posted, embedded in the weekly guidance, but most importantly, make sure you can access SAS Enterprise Minor software. As some of you may already know from going through the instructions on getting connected to SAS Enterprise Minor software, they are somewhat arcane. They're very specific. If you follow those steps exactly in the right order and do it exactly right, well, I agree with Danny. It is a pain, but you only have to do it once, Danny. Once you're connected, you're fine. You're going to be enrolling in the course that I have at SAS because SAS sets it up that way. You're going to be making sure your computer can access the SAS software, and then you'll just log in each time you need it, and you won't have to do all that stuff. It involves making sure you've got the right Java settings and so forth. I mean, it walks you through it pretty clearly. If I can do it, I'm not a network guru or anything. All of you can do it. So I think it'll be fine, but it may take you a couple of attempts, and certainly we can help, and your other classmates who've been successful already can probably provide some advice. But yes, I agree it's a pain. Now, one last slide. There are no textbooks required to be purchased in this course. However, this textbook is excellent. If you've got $15 or so, whatever it costs as a paperback, it's a really nice book. It's not a textbook, by the way. Eric Siegel is one of the giants in the analytics business. He was a professor at Columbia teaching analytics. He started Predictive Analytics World, which is one of the two largest conference organizations doing great stuff. They publish a newspaper called Predictive Analytics Times, which has phenomenal articles. I've presented at 2 of their conferences. They're great. It's just great. And he's the brains behind that. He has written a book called Predictive Analytics. Again, not a textbook. He's not going to explain regression. He's not going to explain support vector machines. What he is going to do is give you some excellent insights as to why analytics is so important. Case histories, stories, real-world stuff. He also has, in the middle of the book, about 10 or 12 pages with line after line of where analytics is being applied in real companies and for what. And that alone is worth the money. It also comes with the entire book on audio and no extra cost. So you can listen to it while you're jogging at the gym or riding in your car, and I guarantee you will enjoy it. So he's the guy really that got me started with analytics many years ago. I was a management science person. Okay, that means I like linear programming and things like that, queuing theory, etc. And I moved over into the world of data analytics many years ago. And Eric is the one who got me started with that. And he is a superb writer, very easy to read. So if you got a few extra bucks, I'm just putting a plug in. I don't get a cut of the money or anything. But this is a great book. Okay, so now I think we're ready to go back to questions. And so I see we have some. So let me see if I can adjust them. Well, most of them said they can hear me. That's good. Can't see me. Well, that's because I was on the wrong screen. And go, okay. It says, here's a question. If we don't see week 1 in the table of contents, is that something set up separately by different professors? Your professor, of course, has to make the lessons available. They're there, and of course they get tweaked and updated each week. I update them and I send them to the other professors, and then they turn on the visibility button, if you will, to make it visible. So yes, talk to your professor, and if he has already done that, then there's something you've got set funny in your particular setting. So whoever is in, you should have lesson 1 ready to go. Of course, the class really started this week. Okay. 9042 is missing content for week 1. Again, same thing. Mail your professor and make sure he may have decided not to turn them on until we had this opening spiel here. So that's kind of fine. Given the course is backloaded, should we plan on more than 20 hours for the back end of the course? I would say that if you've spent the time each week, I don't think that's true. I think when you get to the actual assignments, you're going to feel very comfortable. I mean, we have an entire week. For example, there's 2 weeks on support vector machines, as an example. And this works for most of the sections, most of the content. So the first week, you have an extensive lecture, a video by me, and some readings about what support vector machines are, my explanation of them, how they work, when they're good to use, what they do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second week, you have an assignment to use the support vector machine approach for a problem, a data set. So if you spend the hours each week, you should be comfortable by the time you get to that second week and say, oh, I understand all about support vector machine. I've seen Steve's walkthrough of using SAS Enterprise Miner to do support vector machines. I'm going to follow that along and see if I can do it, albeit for a different data set, of course, and see if I can mirror that and see if I can even add to it. So that's kind of fine. Does the 2172, okay, I don't think we have a section 2172. Maybe that's the section number. The 72 is sort of our course number for this semester. My section, which is 9040, there's 24 in that section, and it's a large section. They should all be able to see the content for week 1. If not, then I don't know what is wrong, because I know several can see it, I think, already. Does this class have access to a virtual lab environment for running SAS in the required version of Java? No. We are running SAS directly from the machines at the SAS Institute, so we have to make sure we can set them up so that they access that. And by the way, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of universities and educational institutions using the SAS academic version, which is the full version. And so that means they all have to go through this process, but they must be able to do it. Okay, Val says, I'm in 9041 and I don't see week 1. It's under course. It should be under content, course content. And again, email your faculty member and make sure he has turned the visibility button on. Again, we're just starting tonight, so you're not behind. It's probably better if some of the professors feel like it's better if you hear this spiel from me to make sure you understand the ground rules before you start delving into the content. I turned mine on, I think, a few days ago, so we should be okay on mine. All right, any other questions? Now, again, this is just to get you started in understanding the ground rules and the flow, and I think that's important because, you know, this is sort of a contract. I'm telling you what you should expect from your professors to do, and we're telling you what we expect you to do. So it's kind of a contract. We're going to explain the techniques. We're going to give you examples. We're going to give you walkthroughs, and you're going to go ahead and then apply these techniques and explain these techniques so that you have evidence understanding and take them and apply them to some data sets and come up with something. You know, hey, here's what I found. Here's a good model. Here's a bad model, or this didn't work, or I needed to tweak this or something. And that's sort of how you do it. I think it's as much like a real-world environment as we can make it in the classroom, because it's important to have that experience. There also are some other opportunities that may or may not come along. Sometimes we find competitions out there that you can enter, usually, you know, kind of an extra thing or a replacement thing, so we'll see. In the book you mentioned, let me just say, in the book you mentioned, the same one you mentioned, a 25-minute, 1-week video. Most likely, well, I don't know. The 25-minute, 1-week video on overview of analytics may mention the Abbott book. Dean Abbott is another guru that I follow religiously, and of course we used his textbook in the class until we got rid of textbooks, and it's also a great book. The book I mentioned tonight by Eric Siegel is not a textbook. Again, it's really a holistic, really great, insightful book about analytics, what people do wrong, including some egregious cases where one company, and you'll recognize the name once you read the book, if you read the book, or just go look at some of the vignettes that Eric's got. They came up with a predictive model that predicted the stock market perfectly. And, you know, almost perfectly. And they thought, we've hit it. We've got the Holy Grail here. And then they found out, you know, and again, this is a big company that you would understand their name. They found out one of the inputs was what the stock market closed at, to predict what the stock market was going to close at. Now, you know, that's not going to work, is it? Another example, suppose you wanted to predict how many home runs somebody's going to hit in the major leagues next year. Well, that's difficult to do because the inputs would have to be how many at-bats did they get? Were they injured? How many, you know, who did they pitch against? You can't do that. So you've got to be very careful, make sure that you're not trying to predict things that are nonsensical or impossible to do. And some of those horror stories are contained in the book. I'll give you one more vignette. He's got a very good explanation in there of what we call the problem where you just try so many combinations of variables that you say, oh, look, I've tried 8. You know, now that we can build multiple models, one of the dangers is you build thousands of models. And sure enough, one of them is going to predict quite well. But it's not reproducible. It's by happenstance. It worked well those 10 years. And you see that often. You'll see stock market charlatans preaching, oh, I've got this model, I backfitted it for 10 years, and look how well it worked. Well, what they've done is run thousands, tens of thousands of models, and found one that did correlate well. That doesn't mean it was predictive. Anyway, I'm getting off the track now. The link to the Integrity Pledge is not working. Well, in my class, I'm asking students to copy and paste the copy and paste the academic pledge in the and submit it in the assignments area. And I think the other professors should do the same. So again, ask your professor what he would like you to do, because that we found that link was often more troublesome than not, but it should be there. You should be able to copy and submit it in the assignments area, not for credit, but just so you get it done, because you're not going to get any grades until you do it. So again, talk to your professor. The syllabus is a good backup. Somebody's pointed out that if you can't see the week 1 readings, go to the syllabus, because the syllabus has the same readings. The syllabus is the overall document for the whole course. Now, the syllabus does get submitted several weeks before the course gets finalized, and sometimes I find better readings I put all the readings in, so I'm the one to blame if you don't like the readings or the videos, because those are my choosing. I'm full-time with UMUC, and I control/develop this course with the help of others. But the syllabus should have the same readings. That's a very good point. Somebody says, I think you mentioned Sarah as the author. Not familiar with who that is. I'll have to go back and look at my own video. Do I need to register for SAS? Yes. Part of the process of getting connected to SAS Enterprise Minor is you first set up your SAS account. Then you enroll in my course that SAS set up for me. Then you connect your computer to the SAS Enterprise Minor by following the steps for the configuration. So it's 3 steps, but they're all outlined in great detail in the discussions area under SAS Enterprise Minor area. They should be there. Good questions. For me, this is the most fun course I teach. I like teaching 610. I enjoy 610 very much, and I also develop 610. This course is where I really enjoy what we do, because I think we're on the cutting edge with a lot of these models, especially some of the ensembles and some of the features that you can do with those, especially talking about deep learning, especially getting into support vector machines. Most organizations have not used any of those techniques. They've used a regression probably a little bit, but there's so many nuances to regression that it's well worth spending time on too. And so you have what I consider to be the best software to use for this thing, and we have some very interesting and yet useful and certainly valuable techniques with proven success stories. And this is your opportunity to learn how to put those together. I think it's enjoyable. I think, again, the only danger is if you don't put the time in, it becomes something where once you get behind and trying to learn 2 techniques in 1 week or something, it's overwhelming, because these are complex subjects. But of course, again, I'm just so amazed that the tediousness has been removed, that I'm delighted to say, oh, I know what's going on behind the scenes, and you will too. You'll know what's going on behind the scenes, because that helps you explain it. But you won't have to go and take pencil to paper and calculate the regression equation or the support vector. Well, you couldn't do the support vector or the neural network stuff by hand. It's impossible. You couldn't build ensemble models by hand. It'd be impossible. So this is a chance to really leverage what's happening. And this is the cutting edge, as I'll say more about. You'll see my video in week 2 says more about this. Just the cutting edge of where analytics is, the predictive modeling aspect. Everybody's got, well, most people have dashboards and some sort of visualization. Most organizations are just now wading into the predictive thing. So once you know what you've done in the past, which is what the visualization does for you, it says, here's where we are, here's what we've done. The next step is, okay, what is likely to occur in the future? And how do I leverage that? And that's where we are in this course. Okay, remember, this entire thing is recorded, so I will post the link in my section and send the link to the other professors to post in their sections. And we're up and running. Again, nice large sections for this semester, so we got a lot of people in here, which is great. I'm delighted so many were able to come tonight. Remember, unfortunately for you, there's no extra credit for attending live, just as there's no penalty not attending live because we don't think it's fair. We have people in different time zones. We have people with different commitments, and that's understandable. That's why the lessons are, in fact, what will be the fate of those that are not currently working? Well, hopefully, when you finish this program, you will be in great demand and have your choice of jobs. Now, that's the plan, right? You don't have to have work-related data sets or anything for this course. So, and you can give your opinion in most of the discussion items based on what you think you understand from the readings, etc. So you don't need to worry about that. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. That way